Hey sewers, Rob Younkers here from Threadymade, and super excited to introduce you guys to the new sleeve we've created for the Frankie top and Dakota dress. You guys asked, we delivered. We love hearing from you on social media, through email. Everybody's been asking about a great sleeve option, and we are excited that we finally created it. So what you're gonna do is completely sew your Frankie top together or your Dakota dress and make sure you finish the hem as well. And then you're going to add the sleeve. So you can check out the original videos for the Dakota dress and Frankie top, and then check out the video for the new sleeves that we've added. The dress kit comes with the two sleeves already cut for you. These are gonna be used for every size, and you can see all the edges are overlocked so you don't have any fraying. So the way I've laid this out is it's a curved pattern piece. The top longer curve is your shoulder, and the bottom curve is the end of your sleeve. So here's the top of your sleeve and here's the bottom. So to get this prepped for inserting elastic and attaching to the dress, what we're gonna do is mark up from the bottom 5/8 of an inch all the way across on the right side of the fabric. That's going to become a fold line. So your handy Threadymade ruler is marked for 1/2 inch. I'm going to place this slot on the edge of the overlock, therefore creating a 5/8 inch seam allowance. So just take a look as I go here. So putting the slot at the top edge of the overlock and marking all the way across the bottom. You're gonna wanna work in like short increments because like I said, this is a curved piece. So it's not going to be a straight line. And you're just going to delicately kind of fold and pin this up when we're finished marking. So I'm working in like 3 or 4 inch segments. Now if you can see, I've got a mark all the way across. I'm going to flip this over, kind of start from the center and fold up on that line. To be honest with you, if you're a beginner sewer and you don't feel comfortable sewing on the right side of the fabric because you can't, really gauge where you're gonna sew at like the 1/2 inch line, go ahead and just pin it on the reverse. If your machine is set up correctly with the right tension, it's going to be fine. So pin every 2 to 3 inches. Again, the fabric is great. It kind of naturally curves. So you're just following that chalk line all the way across. Once your entire line is pinned in place, we're going to be sewing on that same edge that we used for the guide, which is the inner side of this overlock stitch. And then your 3/8 inch elastic will fit nicely inside the 1/2 inch seam allowance. You don't want it too tight because it can buckle inside or twist around. So that little bit of wiggle room with the 1/8 is gonna be really good. So again, this is all pinned. We're gonna take it to the machine and we're gonna stitch right on this inner edge. So now we're gonna sew the hem of the bottom of the sleeve. As I was saying, I'm gonna sew it on the wrong side, which is the opposite of what we usually do, because I wanna make sure that I'm creating the perfect 1/2 inch tunnel for the elastic. So you can see I'm inserting the needle right at that edge of the overlock, which is 1/8 of an inch from the cut edge, which will create a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So go ahead and just keep an eye on that needle. And you want to just be following that edge all the way across, and make sure you start and end with a back stitch. As you can see, I try to make sure my needle is inserted in the fabric before I lift the foot and pull my pins out. I don't want to try to sew over pins because they can break the needle. And also you want to make sure that the fabric isn't going to slip around. So that needle should be in the fabric every time you lift the foot. And end with that back stitch. You get it? Yep. The bottom of the sleeve is sewn. We're a 1/2 inch away now from the folded edge, and this is going to be where we encase our elastic. So we're gonna do the exact same steps on the top of the sleeve. So I'm gonna flip it over for now. Just remember, this is the top of the sleeve. I'm going to measure in from the edge of the overlock, making sure to work in small increments because this is a curve. We're just kind of joining this line together. So just to reiterate, we are 5/8 inch away from the cut edge. The overlock is 1/8, and then we're a 1/2 inch away. So place the ruler on the edge of the overlock and just marking all the way across. Just gonna show you guys this bit of marking because we already did it. I don't wanna bore you. So we're gonna flip it over, start from the middle. And again, just pinning this in place. So you guys will mark yours all the way across, folding up and pinning. Then take it to the machine, stitch right on that inner edge of the overlock, and you will create a 1/2 inch casing for the shoulder elastic. All right, we're ready to cut the elastic for the top and bottom of your sleeve. So the top elastic, we're going to cut 15 inches. So what I want you guys to keep in mind is this is gonna get folded in half and be sewn. So we're gonna have 1/2 inch seam allowance on each side. So once that's sewn up, it's actually gonna be 14 inches of elastic, but go ahead and measure 15. You're not pulling it, you're just measuring 15 flat. So there's your top elastic. And for the bicep area or the bottom of the sleeve, you're gonna wanna go ahead and measure your own bicep, which is kind of like the most, let's say the most muscular part of your arm, and then deduct 2 inches because we want this to be fitted. And obviously the elastic has a lot of give. So we wanna create that sort of blouson gathered effect. So I measured my friend Ruth and her arm was 13. So I'm gonna go ahead and cut this, not at 13, but I'm going to remove 2 inches, which would make it 11, and then I'm going to add 1 inch back for seam allowance. So I'm going to end up cutting this 1 inch smaller than my measurement, and that other inch will become part of our seam allowance. So I've cut this at 12. This will be inserted in the bottom of our sleeve, and the top will go in the top. So what I like to do is use safety pins to kind of work my elastic through. I'm still here with you. I'm just grabbing my safety pins. And what you can do is attach your safety pin to one end of your cut elastic. And we're just gonna fish this through. So just take a close look at what I'm doing here. We've got a 1/2 inch, which is great because this 3/8 inch elastic will neatly kind of sit inside of its casing. It won't twist. You don't want to make the tunnel too small because it becomes bunchy. So you're going to want to kind of push towards the bottom of the pin and pull the top. So pushing fabric onto the bottom, release that hand and pull this way. So want to make sure that you don't forget that you've got to secure this when you get to the end and pull it through, and then you have to redo it. So I'm kind of pulling and also watching the end of my elastic, because when I get there, I'm just gonna put a little pin in place to secure it, and then this will start the gathering effect. So take your time with this again. So I'm holding the bottom, pushing fabric on, holding and releasing, but also paying attention to this end. So once I see that my elastic has hit the end of the fabric, I'm gonna go ahead and put a pin in place to hold it, and then continue to the other side. I actually love creating casings and inserting elastic. I don't know why, it's this thing I have. It's probably all the precision that's involved. You want to make sure that elastic is not twisting. So go ahead and pull it all the way out your other end. So I use my finger to hold it in place when I see that that elastic has reached the other side, the side seam or under seam, and put a safety pin in place. Now at this point, what you're going to need to do is secure this elastic inside. So I've got the pins. I can show you that it's creating the gathers because the elastic is shorter than the fabric. And you're going to want to run a stitch on each side. I would say in about, like 3/8 of an inch, just so you're not into the dress itself. 1/4 inch, 3/8 of an inch to secure that elastic in place on one side, and secure it on the other side as well. And then you're gonna repeat these exact same steps to create the shoulder area of your dress. So I'm securing the elastic in place within my casings on the top of the sleeve and the bottom. Like I said, you can go like about 1/4 inch from the edge, just making sure you catch that elastic. So inserting my needle. I'm not releasing my pin yet because the elastic could pull. So I'm gonna kind of work very carefully and start sewing a little bit above. I'm gonna back stitch. Once I feel like I've started to catch the elastic, I'm gonna go ahead and release the pin. Continue, back stitch, and you can see I've caught my elastic inside. So just flip it over. You're gonna do that on the other side. Again, you wanna work with the pedal and also winding with your hand to kind of make sure that everything's in place. I'm gonna do like 2 stitches. Now I know my needle's in that elastic holding it. I can release my pin. About 1/4 inch from my cut edge here. Back stitching to secure. Okay, so now the bottom of our sleeve is in place, all secured. You're gonna repeat the same steps on the top of your sleeve. So the top and bottom of the sleeve are folded under. We've created casings and sewn in our elastic. Now, what I like to do is give myself a quick note saying shoulder, so that as I'm sewing and moving along, I don't mistake the top of the sleeve for the bottom or vice versa. So I'm just gonna go ahead and pin that in place as my reminder. And the next step we wanna do is create our seam. So the bottom of the sleeve, we're gonna match up, and we're going to pin from the bottom of the sleeve up 7 inches. You can grab your ruler. Like usual, right sides together, making sure the edges line up. And I'm kind of work directly on top of my ruler. So measuring up 7 inches. This is creating the underneath area of the sleeve, and then the remainder will be attached to the dress, creating sort of the shoulder piece. So go ahead and pin. Then we're going to use a 1/2 inch seam allowance and sew from our 7-inch mark down to the hem. Okay, so with the dress sewn together and your sleeves mostly together as well, it's time to attach the sleeve to the body of the dress. Now, this may seem complicated at first, but just take your time with it and follow my steps. And it's really simplified. So what makes it tricky is that we're not just creating a normal seam where you would attach right sides and sew, because then we would lose the ruffle around the sleeve. What we're trying to do is keep this shirring, or I'm saying ruffle, but shirring all the way around the sleeve on the dress, because it just makes for a much cuter detail. So I'm gonna walk you guys through the steps to do that. So I'm gonna move this aside and bring our other sleeve into focus. So as you can see, you've sewn up the 7 inches and back stitched, and we've got this opening. So what we're gonna do is sew this to the body of the dress. So we're just gonna break this down into pieces because we are attaching the fabric itself to a row of shirring. So it's a little tricky, but what we're gonna do first is, I'm gonna actually just pin these together. We can mark both at once. So here's our ruler. So I'm just gonna measure from the end of the sleeve to where we finish sewing, and that also is 7 inches. So I'm going to put a little chalk mark halfway, which is 3.5 on both sides. Okay, so you can mark the right side and the wrong side. And then I'm going to bring our dress back, and from the side seam, I'm going to pull 7 inches. So one side seam is here. I'm gonna pull flat across because we're gonna pull this to sew it together. So from 7, here's our 0 starting point. So I'm gonna put a safety pin. And then also mark 3.5 here in the center. And we're just gonna line these up so we're not pulling all of this at once and trying to pin. We're just gonna work in small little 3.5 inch sections, and then go ahead and do the same thing from the other side seam. So pulling to 7, safety pin, and then finding that 3.5 inch center mark. So these safety pins are going to be our pinning and then work into our sewing guidelines. So just take a look with me about what we're going to do here. It's a little awkward to show you guys, but just pull out some kind of cutting board or something to work on. I actually just literally pulled this out of my kitchen, And I'm just placing it inside the dress. It helps stabilize things a little bit. And fold it down. Okay? So now we're looking at the side seam and then the front and the back. Then we're gonna grab our sleeve. So what I'm gonna do is this opening is going to attach here. But again, we want those ruffles, I keep saying ruffles, I mean the gathers, to come over that edge, okay? So, going to take the right side of the fabric and lay it down on the inside here, which is different because usually we would put right sides together. So we're actually lining up the right side of the sleeve inside the garment, okay? And now, at this point, let's match that up to our first row of smocking, and then you'll see the seam allowance actually works to touch the second row of smocking. So I'm going to kind of hold on to this. Place my pin at my side seam. And then same thing at our 7-inch mark. Now remember, this is going to get pulled and sit flat. So I'm going to lay this down. Again, touching that second row of smocking. Pinning on the right side because we're going to sew over this row of smocking. And then again, in these short little spots, we're going to kind of pull flat. And we're matching up our little notch. I can see it, I don't know if you guys can, to the safety pin. And just make sure as you're doing this that you're checking both sides because like I said, this second row smocking is your guideline. So if you're going off, you know, okay, I have to lift a little bit and just realign it. So take your time with this. The better that you pin it, the more accurate, the easier your sewing will be. So pinning. And you can see on these parts, everything's starting to line up. So I'm going to grab here and here, pull. There's that edge and the smocking. Flip. Sorry, you guys can't see this. There you go. And now, if you take a look, I can take out my safety pins. And you'll see that these pieces, when pulled, line up perfectly. And remember, you're only sewing from one side seam out. You'll do that first, then you'll do the other side. You cannot sew this in one line because of the way it's constructed. So now we'll take this to the machine and sew this side. So as I'm going to sew the sleeve to the dress itself, you want to make sure that you're checking the top, the bottom as you're sewing. There's a lot of moving parts here. You're kind of pulling the elastic a bit. You're watching your needle. So what I like to do is start from like the front and work towards the side seam. So I'm going to line up my needle in place. I like to start a little bit before the sleeve actually hits the garment. And I'm positioning my needle in place. Now don't sew over pins. I mean, look, it's gonna happen sometimes. Really try to avoid it. So I'm kind of pulling back here and pulling here just to create a flat area. I'm gonna do like 2 stitches on that row of smocking. So this stitch line gets hidden, more or less, if you're sewing nice and straight. Making sure that needle's back in, and then I'm gonna back stitch. So we know that that's securely on. So keeping everything else out of the way, work in these small increments. So I'm gonna pull, sewing on that first line of smocking, always making sure that the needle's in the fabric before you pull your pins out. You don't want things to shift around. And just continue right on that line. And you can see how dividing the fabric up with the gathers really makes it easier to work in sections. If you pulled your pin out now, the dress is going to move and things get misaligned. So again, needle in the fabric, take your pin out, holding the back, pulling slightly in the front to flatten, working towards the side seam. Removing this pin. Okay, so it's time to attach the back of the sleeve to the back of the dress. We're gonna do it the same way as the front. It's actually easier because the front's sewn on, we don't have so many pins. So lining up that edge of the sleeve against the second row of smocking, flipping to the right side, pinning. We want to find that notch at the 3.5 inch mark. Flip that over. And pinning. We can remove that safety pin. And then we're going to pull from the side seam to that pin, the edge on the second row smocking, flip over, give yourself a few pins, and then you can see we're all aligned here. I'm going to pull. Pin. So then I'm just going to make sure that I've got my side seam pinned. And then before you take it to the machine, you can give a little pull test to make sure everything's gonna go together nice and flat and all your shirring is even. So let's see. Okay. Yeah, perfect. Let's go to the machine. So for attaching the back of the sleeve to the dress, I'm actually going to start from the side seam this time. And again, making sure that the only areas you're stitching through are the dress and that part of the sleeve. Watch all this bulk underneath. So set yourself up. Again, there's that side seam. Placing the needle in the fabric on that first row of smocking. You can pull that first pin out. Just, again, just pulling flat. You don't need to pull too tight. Go ahead and stitch a bit forward. And then just back stitch to that side seam. Stitching on that first row of smocking as your guide. Needle in the fabric before you pull out your pins. Working in these small little sections of 3.5 inches. Again, always kind of flipping under to make sure that nothing's been caught up in there that shouldn't be. And just like we did on the front, I want to go a little bit past the point where the sleeve attaches and then back stitch. We want to make sure the entire sleeve is attached. So just, I mean, maybe 1/8 of an inch. There you go. So the sleeve is attached. That cute little gathering detail is still visible from the outside. Don't you guys love trying something new? So it's finished. You've completed the sleeves on either your Frankie top or your Dakota dress. Great, great option. You can also wear this off the shoulder for a different look. We love giving you guys a variety of ideas and options, and we love hearing yours. So make sure to subscribe to our channel, like our videos, and please keep it coming. We love the ideas. Share your thoughts with us. We love bringing new things to you. So happy sewing.